Great, thanks.
All right. Sweet. Okay. It's probably enough of hearing me talk about knots. So our next up is Jeff Mitchell. So Jeff is a IFMJ mountain guide out of Revelstoke, and he runs a guiding business, Revelstoke Mountain School, that focuses on instruction and objective-based guiding for skiing, rock climbing, and mountain climbing. And he is going to talk about just that, how to use the rad line.
Hey, can you hear me? Is this working?
You can hear you, it's working.
Oh, nice. Hey guys, yeah, I'm just gonna spend a little bit of time here, the next 20 minutes or so, talking about lightweight rope kits and kind of how to use them and their pros and cons, and maybe we'll talk about I'll talk about some tips and tricks here if I can figure out how to use Zoom. Yeah, and thanks a lot, Ross, for putting this together and you know, bringing it online. It's pretty wicked. It's great to, you know, think about being out in the mountains again and thinking about some of these tools that we use on a regular basis. And it was fun to put this presentation together and look through some old photos and stuff too. It's been great. So lightweight rope kits, pros and cons, tips and tricks. Here we go. I'll do my best. So the overview. I'll talk about what a lightweight rope kit is, the uses for lightweight rope kits, and then just the advantages and disadvantages of using the lightweight kit versus a regular climbing rope. So, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions. So what is a lightweight rope kit? So these are like a small diameter, low stretch, really light cords that are specialized. They're super specialized. We've been starting to use them a lot for glacier travel and for crevasse rescue, and it's like quickly becoming a go-to for a glacier rope these days in my backpack. That being said, they are a super specialized piece of equipment, and they require a little bit of knowledge about the equipment, the limitations, and the gear that we need to use with them. There's a couple of different lightweight rope kits out there. My go-to is the Petzl Rad Kit. So that's the one pictured here in the slideshow, and that's the one I'm going to talk about. I'm going to kind of talk mostly about the Rad Kit. Sterling has one out there that they designed a couple of years ago, and it works really great. It just has a couple of you know, other pieces to it that I find are even more challenging to use, and find that, you know, we had to really practice with it even more in order to use those devices and put them together. And I found that, you know, using that device in a stressful situation would be even a little bit more difficult. The downside of the Petzl Rad line versus the Sterling Quickie Descender kit. The Sterling kit that Kirk Mothner designed a bunch of years ago, it is not load limiting. So given a certain load, 4 kilonewtons, it'll actually start to slide in one of the devices instead of shock loading it and transferring all those forces onto an anchor or onto somebody that's using it in a rescue situation. So yeah, I'll just show you a couple of things here that I usually carry in my kit. So the Petzl Rad line, the system, it comes with one of these wicked little pieces of cord. It's 6 millimeters in diameter, and it has a strength of 8 kilonewtons here, which is a fair bit lower than a climbing rope. The big difference between the Radline and a regular climbing rope, aside from its lightweight and thin diameter, is its low stretch. So it's basically a static cord. With that being said, I mean, it's such a skinny little cord. We need some specific tools in order to use this in crevasse rescue. So the tools that I carry around with it, I have a small piece of 5mm prusik that that we can use as a rope grab, or we can use to move around on the rope if we need to give ourselves a quick little belay up to the lip of a crevasse or something like that. We also need a specific progress capture when we're using it for crevasse rescue. So Petzl recommends using the micro traction. And then for a rope grab, they recommend that we use the T-block, and you use that with all the tests that they've done. They've used that with one of these attaché carabiners. So the difference between some of the other devices out there, a couple of different companies are starting to make these wicked little progress captures. This guy and what Petzl has done is they've gone through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests with this equipment, and they've basically made it so that they allow us to carry this and use this both recreationally and when we're guiding. So yeah, that's what it is. Unfortunately, I don't have one of the Sterling ropes here to demonstrate that and to show you guys, but there's tons of information online. All right, so what do we use these lightweight rope kits for? We can use them for rappelling, we can use them for glacier travel, and we can use them for crevasse rescue. Just noticing some of my spelling errors there. Not my greatest strength. So they're super specialized and they come with limitations. We can use them for these specific tasks, but we can't really improvise with these ropes. Okay. So the big advantage of the rad kit and these lightweight rope kits are, they're obviously super light. 6mm piece of cord versus 8mm or 9 or 10mm climbing rope. It's obviously way lighter. The whole kit that Petzl sells together weighs just over a kilogram, so super light. This piece of rope here, this is like 660 grams. Hardly even feel it in your backpack. So I mean, every day and every year, as time goes on, I'm just like continuously trying to reduce the weight in my backpack. So this has been a huge advantage for me and for all of us out there. That being said, some of those objectives that, maybe you're like just going across a little tiny glacier and you're like, geez, yeah, I don't really want to carry a rope. Well, if it's only 1 kilogram and you can throw that in and not even hardly even notice it. So that being said, you're just more likely to carry one of these lightweight rope kits. So kind of one of the advantages there. I think I don't have the whole kit here, but I can show you later kind of what I carry as part of my crevasse rescue, my full kit. All right, moving on. The disadvantages of the lightweight rope kits and the rad line. You know, you can see there's obviously way more disadvantages than there are advantages. You know, these guys, this gear, it's super specialized. You know, I spent an entire day with a bunch of mountain guides going through and learning what we can and can't do with these ropes. You know, I was blown away. Super informative. I mean, I only have 20 minutes to talk to you guys about it, but I just recommend, you know, taking a full course, or you know, just practicing with your kits if that's what you're going to use when you're out on a glacier. So they're super specialized, and like I was previously saying, they require a whole bunch of special tools to take with you. You know, you can't just go out there with a couple of pieces of pressic and a couple of locking carabiners and hope that you're going to get somebody out of a crevasse with one of these things. It's just not going to work. They're low stretch, so they're basically a static cord. And so what that means is if you're traveling on a glacier with one of these cords and somebody falls into a crevasse, the rope isn't going to absorb any of the force of that fall. That force is all going to be transferred onto the climbers, those people that are tied into the rope with you. So it's going to pull you off your feet. It's going to probably knock you down and drag you along the snow for a little bit. And you know, hopefully you're well rehearsed in your crevasse rescue, and you can stop that fall. So low stretch means it's going to be hard to hold the fall. I mean, there are some other parts of the equation that will absorb some of that force in the fall, as this skinny little rope cuts through the bridge of or the roof of a snow bridge. Then that's going to absorb a whole bunch of the force as well. That's kind of what we're counting on. Definitely recommend, you know, putting knots in your rope when you're using one of these for glacier travel. These ropes, they have limited use, so they can't be used for climbing. Like if all of a sudden you're cruising through the mountains and you're like, oh shit, well, I'm gonna need a belay for this little rock step here or something, or I wasn't expecting this. It's like, you know, taking a lead fall on one of these ropes, it's like, it's gonna create and transfer so much force into you and your belayer that you're just gonna wreck yourself. I'll talk a little bit more about that in some upcoming slides here. Yeah, so they're easy. It's easy to shock load a system or shock load an anchor. They're also really expensive. It's I can't remember the exact price. I think the whole kit costs about $500 at MEC. Yeah, so they're expensive, and they wear out. You know, if you're using it a lot, if it's exposed to the sun a lot, then yeah, it's going to break down. It's going to not last as long. Okay, moving on here. Yeah, I started to talk a little bit on my last slide about some forces here. So my main takeaway from you know, my full day working with these ropes was how easy it is to create like critical forces in a system. So the little picture beside the graph here, it's trying to explain the forces that are created and how that fall factor of 0.4. So if an 80 kilogram person falls only 80 centimeters, free falls 80 centimeters with 2 meters of rope out, then they're going to create a fall factor of 0.4. So not a big fall factor. It's actually really easy to create those forces. And what that translates to is creating an impact force of up to 6.5 kilonewtons. I'm not going to go into what a kilonewton is here in this short period of time, but to put it all into perspective, what we're saying here is, if you're building an anchor, a T-slot anchor out of something like an ice axe, if you built a T-slot anchor out of an ice axe, you built it with superb craftsmanship and the direction of pull, everything was bang on. That axe, or that ice axe T-slot anchor, that will break somewhere around 3 kilonewtons of force. So just trying to put into perspective how easy it is to create forces that could potentially create an anchor to fail. So you can imagine, if you're pulling somebody out of a crevasse and maybe they're like helping you out, maybe they're like trying to climb up the crevasse, or they're pulling on the rope and then their hands slip off of it and they fall like 80 centimeters onto this low stretch rope. You're creating impact forces of 6.5 kilonewtons, and it's a high likelihood that your anchor may not hold those forces. So what can you do in that sort of situation? If you're the rescuer, you can back your anchor up, you can create another anchor. If you're just building an anchor out of a single ice axe, then you should be definitely thinking about backing up that anchor. What else? What else about forces here? So these the sheath. This is these ropes. They're a combination of nylon, aramid, and Dyneema. It's how they create such a strong piece of cord in such a small diameter. But what Petzl found in their testing is that with this toothed device here, that this sheath can still get ripped off at just over 5 kilonewtons of force. So when we talk about an 80 centimeter fall, then we're talking about impact forces of 6.5 kilonewtons. We're getting up there around the range of potentially ripping the sheath off of this skinny little rope. So those are some of the limitations in the whole system here, and these are awesome, and I fully endorse the system, but it's super important that that we know the limitations and we know how easy it is to overload it and put ourselves in a harmful situation. This little guy, this Tiblock, what Petzl came up with was a potential for ripping the sheath off at 4 kilonewtons of force. So that being said, like when you're using this as a rope grab and you're cranking somebody, maybe you got a couple of people that are really cranking on the rope trying to get someone out of a crevasse, then 4 people could definitely start to create those forces that could wreck the rope and wreck the sheath and put yourselves in a pretty shitty situation. What time is it? Okay, 5 more minutes here. So what I'm trying to get at here with all this talk on impact forces is we just have we're operating with these really tight margins in a rescue situation, which is really could be a pretty it's a potentially hazardous situation, right? And we definitely don't want to be making these things worse. So moving on here. Yeah, so the takeaways that I've come up with through my my years of practice and carrying these ropes around and instructing people on how to use these things properly are, to be really clear on, you need to be really clear on the limitations of the tools you're carrying around. So if you think that, you're going to have to do some rock climbing, or you're going to be belaying somebody or giving a lead belay, then, this is it's definitely not the tool to be using. And you should think about actually carrying that full strength rope out there in the mountains with you. Another takeaway, you absolutely, positively need to have the right tools with you in order to use one of these lightweight ropes properly, and in order to, be able to get somebody out of a crevasse. There's just very little that you can do to improvise with these things. So make sure you got these. And make sure everybody in your group's got one. It doesn't help if you're carrying the rope and somebody else is carrying the micro traction, and like they go into the crevasse with the micro traction. These things, I teach a ton of crevasse rescue courses, and I used to tell people this is a pretty specialized piece of equipment. And now I just recommend that everybody buys one. If you're going to be moving around on a glacier, it's just worth it. They cost somewhere around $100, and they're useful in lots of applications, not just in crevasse rescue. In rope ascension, they're super useful. In rock climbing, rope rescue, incredibly useful. They just make everything a lot easier. And then you need to know the techniques, right? So, Ross just talked about a whole bunch of knots. You got to know those knots and know what knots are going to be appropriate to be using with these lightweight kits. Like the recommended knot to tie into a carabiner here, the barrel knot. It's simple, but you just need to know it and practice it. So, this low stretch, like I was saying, like just as a takeaway, the low stretch means it's really easy to create high forces, and those forces can be transferred to the person that's falling into the crevasse, the person that's being rescued from the crevasse, and the anchor that you're doing your rescue from. Yeah, so I've got my last slide here. There's some online resources. There's so much stuff out there. Petzl is amazing with sharing all their tests. They have a whole manual on how to use this thing, and they've got some cool videos out there on how to use it in crevasse rescue, what its best uses are, and there's a quick video there on how to set up a rappel with it. Yeah, they're awesome. I'll take these resources and I'll put them into the chat here as soon as I learn how to do that. But in the meantime, I will. I'll just open the floor for some questions here. Yeah, anybody got any questions on this stuff? Can you raise your hands? Raise your hands if you have any questions. Okay, you can also ask questions in the question. Oh, look, there's questions and answers. Does the 5mm prusik actually grab on the 6mm cord? Should you use a smaller diameter prusik? You know, that's a great question. It does. It will grab onto the 6 millimeter cord. I have tested it out. It depends a little bit on you know, whether your rope is icy or wet. If it's icy or wet, you might just have to give it another wrap. But yeah, I found that the 5 millimeter works really well.
Looks like Michael here's got a question. I think.
Michael, what's your question?
We were wondering if the micro traction is actually rated for the rad line. I have one in my hand that says 8 to 11 millimeter. The rad line is 6. Is that just because it's specific for the rad line, or
is there a special micro traction for the rad line?
No, that's an awesome question, Michael. Thanks for bringing that up. You know, Petzl would, when they created the micro traction, they didn't intend for it to be used with such a thin line here. But then what they did is they went out and did a whole bunch of tests, like thousands of tests with the rad line and the micro traction. And what they came up with was, yes, it actually can be used with the micro traction can be used with the rad line, and they do endorse that they be used together. I mean, that being said, they don't endorse that the micro traction be used with other static cords like the Sterling rope that they've created. They did like super interesting reads on their website about, and some great graphing. You know, they tested all of the different cords out there, and some of them were breaking at as little as 1.7 kilonewtons of force. So, you know, if we talk about an 80 centimeter fall on one of these lines creating 6.5, it sure as heck doesn't take much to create yeah, that 1.7 kilonewtons of force. So I'd have to recommend that, you know, if you're going to be using a rad line, you're using the right tools with that equipment. And no, I don't work for Petzl, but I do like the products. Yeah, does that answer your question there, Michael?
It does.
yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. I see another question here. What happens in case of sheath failure? Would the person completely fall or still be held by something? Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. If anybody else in the audience does have the answer, then I could speak up and speak to it, then I'd love to know. I know with a fully rated rope, when the sheath fails, then the core is where the strength of the rope. So typically, catastrophic failure won't happen. But you know, I've never witnessed it with one of these. I haven't witnessed a sheath failure, but I do know that it's going to have it's going to have a worse effect because the sheath is, you know, the Dyneema is woven into the sheath of this guy, and some of the strength in the rope does come from the sheath. So, you know, I'll look into that. It's something I should know. Thanks for the question, Nick. Anonymous says, how many rescues have you been a part of? 2. Yeah, I've been a part of 2 rescues. Neither one of them were using one of these lightweight lines. My first rescue was just me and one other person on a traverse, Great Divide traverse. We were a long ways away from anywhere, and we were using one of the old Beal Rando ropes. So it was slightly thicker than this, and it was dynamic, and it cut so far into the bridge of the crevasse that it was like, it held an incredible amount of the energy, absorbed tons of the energy, and then all the stretch You know, I was like quite green in my mountain experience at that point, and really keen to learn. But yeah, I feel like in that situation, there was a lot of things that went well for us, and we got pretty lucky. The other rescue that I was a part of, you know, I witnessed in Chamonix a bunch of years ago, and it was, you know, the pros were had been lowered out of a helicopter and were already involved, and my ski partner and I, we approached them and just helped them pad the lip of the crevasse and pull the person in. And you know, everything worked out okay. We had like a 11 mil static line to do that rescue with. Another question here: what kind of knot do you prefer to use on glacier travel to slow a fall? Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I just use a simple overhand on a bite here. It works. It's simple, and it takes up it doesn't take up that much rope. Doesn't use a ton of rope. I guess the other thing to point out, one of the big takeaways that I had using these lines is, you know, this barrel knot that you can see here. If you're tied into the line with the barrel knot, or any knot for that matter, even a figure eight, if you're gonna fall, if you're like falling into, if you're shock loading one of these ropes, they're basically a one-time use rope, because you're never gonna get that knot out. Okay, what happens in case of sheath failure? Got that one. The rad kit is 30 meters if traveling with 3 people. Should you opt for a 60 meter? When do you recommend a 30 meter over a 60 meter and vice versa? I would recommend just multiple 30 meter lines. Yeah, kind of like recreationally and professionally. I always try and have 2 of these kits in the party. You know, I carry one in my bag, and then hopefully somebody that's skiing at the back of a group would have one in their bag. So, you know, I bring 2, hand one out to one of my strongest guests that has the most amount of experience, and you know, just teach them how to use it. Right on. Any more questions there? I think we're running low on time here. Okay, well, I'll wrap it up on that note. Yeah, we got Ruben's coming up next.